If you think about servitization as a journey, first you have a product and then you offer services alongside the product. So then your product and service is almost on equal footing. And for me, the future is where the product is a subset of the service and you're able to offer services and it's agnostic of product. And in that case, your servitization model has truly transformed to the next level in that journey or next evolution in that journey.
Okay, hello and welcome to a new episode of Copperberg Conversations on Manufacturing Matters. I'm your host, Nina Roper Yearwood from Copperberg. Whether you're listening during your morning commute or winding down after work, I'm so glad you're here. Joining us today is Umayal Palaniappan, or Uma, someone whose journey reflects both technical depth and strategic breadth needed in driving change in services and digital. Uma's journey started in Malaysia with early software engineering and human factors engineering roles before she found herself at Rolls-Royce, where she spent 2 decades growing from a curious manufacturing graduate trainee into a servitization strategist. She thrives on solving complex puzzles, whether that's transforming how a company approaches services strategy or streamlining processes across multiple continents. Outside the boardroom, she's passionate about building bridges, connecting business functions, fostering international partnerships, or helping the next generation find their voice. Uma is currently exploring different sectors through board advisory and mentoring before seeking her next career move. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with her husband and their spaniel in Derby. Uma, welcome and thank you so much for being here. So excited to pick your brain today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina. I'm super excited too. It's great to be doing a podcast. Who knew these kinds of things existed, when we were kids, and now it's like all the
I
rage.
know. It's like a radio show but online
Yeah.
essentially. And we kind of get to be our own radio hosts. So, I'd love to go back a bit to start. Could you give us an overview of what brought you into the world of engineering and technology?
I think if I go all the way back, it's probably Lego and a BBC computer. It's what I was exposed to, right, as a child. My dad had great interest in sort of tech and computer and IT and everything in general. And so it made me curious. I was exposed to, engineering growing up in Malaysia as well. There's a lot of focus on the sciences, and so it's very easy to get involved in engineering and technology. It's encouraged, and I had an aptitude towards it. So I studied computer science and I have a master's in ergonomics, which is otherwise known as human factors engineering. And that has given me the foundation and credibility to understand not only technically how things work, but the human and machine interaction, how people play into change, and how systems and um, everything really works together, and that you can't have one without the other.
You have worn so many hats over the years and moved across continents essentially. What's kept you curious over the years?
That's a great question. I think it's the fact that systems exist in any type of function or area. It's not exclusive to just one particular company or one particular industry. And so the ability to constantly change and challenge myself in different sort of areas, from purchasing to manufacturing to services to transformation, it means that you can always apply your learning and you can always find new ways to solve problems. And that's probably what's kept me curious.
Okay, I will jump right in. By
Sure.
the end of 2023, there was a great buzz around generative AI, and people outside of tech circles were excited about it. In manufacturing, I've heard about it being talked about in the context or linking it almost to advanced services, smarter services, and as well as outcome-based models. So really big promises, shiny promises. So, from a Copperberg perspective, that's looking at it from, outside looking in, and you from within a highly technical industrial environment, how did you see AI developing around those times?
So I think the difference is that AI has been around for a while. Artificial intelligence has been around for a while, and it's been used very effectively by many organizations, including the one I worked at, Rolls-Royce, in terms of determining, different service intervals or how, total care contracts are constructed and managed. And so it's not something that was new. The capability around artificial intelligence or investing in artificial intelligence wasn't unusual. But the difference is generative AI, which is large language models, became mainstream. And there's always the hype curve. And if you Google the hype curve, that exists everywhere. So it became an interesting dichotomy where it was exciting. Everybody who then understood what it could be got super excited about it. And then you had very practical, seasoned people who understood the technology and the structure going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yes, it's interesting. Yes, it's super cool. It has a lot of potential, but it's not a magic wand that's going to solve all your problems. And so, um, and I, and that's settled a bit more. And now you've got, agentic AI that's come around. I think that's how you say it. And that has, got leaps and bounds ahead of it as well.
So now that, like you said, we've settled, where do you think engineering companies, manufacturing companies are, making great progress in, making that AI into something that can be really useful and they can derive value from in supporting their shift towards servitization? And where are they still getting stuck?
I think a lot of the time people get stuck in the change. So there's a very little um, amount of sometimes appreciation that this is a massive change program and that change accounts for 50% of implementation of anything, especially when it's something like artificial intelligence, because you can no longer operate in the way you used to operate. Because if you did that, then the take up of the AI would be ineffective. You have to account for how people's roles are going to change. Yes, it augments the role. It's not meant to replace the human, but how that happens and that whole change program is where I think organizations get stuck because they just think, well, here's the tool. The tool's great. The tool's going to give us all of this benefit. Well, why isn't it being used effectively? Why aren't we getting the results that we want to see? And it's because the operating model hasn't necessarily changed. The buy-in isn't necessarily there. People haven't been brought along on the journey to show how this enhances what they do to bring about more value. All of that has changed.
Okay, fantastic. That really made me think about zooming out now and
Yeah,
looking at servitization as a broader um, strategic imperative for companies. And so I will ask you a very stupid question and tell me what you think about this. So, generative AI, and well, AI has been around for many, many years, as you said. And but now I see from a media perspective, from coverage perspective, essentially, there's this momentum, there's this general excitement, there's this, people are suddenly becoming AI experts in a matter of years. And so, um, why do you think, what is driving this momentum now? Why is this so timely and crucial?
I don't think that's a stupid question at all, Nina. In fact, I don't know if I've got the right answer for the question. It's a good question. Why now? So, this is obviously my opinion. Products have always existed, right? Like companies offer products, and if you look between competitors, sometimes the differentiation within the product isn't always very stark, and that's because there's a standard everyone needs to adhere to for a customer to want to buy a product, right? So then, so it's the Kano model. It almost becomes this is commonplace. So what's new? What's extra? What's different? And then I can tie that into servitization to go. That's where companies can differentiate themselves, right? So they're able to provide something beyond just the product. So generative AI, because it so much power, and it is powerful, right? It has the ability to, and has fundamentally disrupted how things work and change. And it's almost like when the computer first came into offices, it was capability and technology, and it allowed you to do so much more. So now is the time, because if you capitalize on something when it's in its early days, or when it's has so much impact, then you are making yourself or differentiating yourself and putting yourself in a position of being ahead of your competitors, or being able to offer something that is more meaningful to your customer in terms of value, and also you get better return on investment. So all of this, in a long-winded way, is, I think, why things are important now, and why generative AI is having so much of a center stage spotlight at present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. I'm just going back to what you said about servitization initiatives and change being fundamentally hard.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would ask you a very broad question now. What do you think does it take for a company to successfully scale their servitization initiatives? So from early pilots into impactful, sustainable business models.
So I touched on this earlier, and I think that principle sort of applies. It's the clear route to value. So it has to be clear route to value for the customer, and also then route to value internally for the organization offering the service, right? Because it doesn't make sense if you're the only one who makes money in it, because then realistically, I don't think your customer necessarily is going to buy the product. They need to see value in it. And what you think is value for your customer isn't necessarily true. You have to understand what the customer deems to be valuable.
Hmm. So, in paving that route to value, so it's essentially, paving the way to your servitization journey, what critical capabilities, skill sets, for example, or mindsets should companies prioritize to prepare themselves for this?
So we talked about a pilot earlier. So I think piloting, being agile, failing fast, iteration, those are key sort of skills that need to be considered. In terms of capability, it would be a cross section within the organization. So you need almost your full value chain
Hmm.
in that sort of change team, so that you understand all aspects and you build a product that makes sense. Because you can't have, just your engineering team design your service, and you can't just have your service team sort of design what the product needs to look like, right? They have to work together. So you have to have all the different elements in your value chain working together. And that is one way of ensuring that your business model will work and that your operating model will work, because both are key for successful pilots to then become offerings.
Mm-hmm. So now my question is, for engineering driven cultures, uh, transforming, the I mean, it all sounds nice, right? It almost sounds like a pipe dream, working together, cross functional collaboration. It all sounds very ideal, but of course, when it comes down to rolling up your sleeves and the reality, it doesn't always look very pretty like that. So why is it so challenging for engineering driven cultures to collaborate cross functionally?
So, to collaborate cross-functionally. Um, I think it's because they don't understand each other's lived experience, right? So someone who's in engineering doesn't necessarily understand how difficult it is for someone in service.
Mm-hmm.
And someone in service doesn't necessarily understand how complex or how much time it particularly takes for an issue or technical issue to be solved. And so pulling people together and getting them to work together is a change. This is why the change takes time. You can accelerate it by creating environments that allow for that, right? So you pull them in together, you give them a way, you give them a common goal, you ensure that the vision is clear and that they all buy into that vision. And all of these different change steps helps with making sure that collaboration is possible. And it's hard. Change is hard. And you need them to work together and you need them to understand how things are for one another. It's an interesting thing. I remember Rolls-Royce doing at one point. They used to have these secondments where engineers would go and do an airline secondment. So it gave them a real understanding of how the customer worked, how their product behaved in service, and how the customer viewed and valued what was being offered. Because there's nothing like experience to ground you in what's happening.
Okay, I can see that you have your penguin with you behind.
Ah, yes.
Yes, I can see
Hero.
his little
Hero is my
beak.
penguin.
Yeah, peeking out. So what's the story behind that? Why is he
um,
here?
Hero is here because
Mhm.
Hero for me is a reminder um, of how to lead change. So Hero is a characterization from Cotter's My Iceberg is Melting. So it talks about how a colony of penguins discover that their iceberg is melting and how they manage that change and what they need to do about it. And it's based on Cotter's 8 steps for leading change. And one of the keys, it constantly reminds me that change lands differently with each individual. And so some of these penguins believed that their iceberg was melting. Some of them didn't believe in it at all. And so how do you glue people together? There are steps. You create a sense of urgency, and then everyone likely bands together, some more reluctantly than others. But then you work towards how you solve that. And the future state is going to be different. And you need everybody along the journey. You need the naysayers as well. You need the people who are more conservative, and you need the people who are going to go, but well, what about this? But that won't work. Because then it allows for you to address issues because it's important to someone and it's important to some part of the program that you may not necessarily have appreciated, because we have interdependencies in processes, in data, or in the way that something has been, the operating model has been designed, that you need to be aware of. And I know this all sounds very utopian, But this is why failing fast, having pilots, constantly having the humility to admit, right, this doesn't work, we need to do things differently, helps in making sure that this kind of change will stick.
It's a very big undertaking, right? Because it forces people, servitization, it forces people to rethink, from product to outcome, and from product to customer, and how the customer uses an equipment, or a certain machine that you provide them. What does it take to make it stick when it comes to alignment, from leadership to the shop floor, the front lines? How do you make that stick?
So to start with, you need a very clear vision, right? You need to know what is it that we're trying to achieve. And then it needs to resonate with each individual. They need to know how what they're doing affects the outcome. They need to see themselves in that ecosystem to understand the importance of what they're doing, the importance of the change, and therefore how that affects the customer. Because if you have that customer focus or customer first mentality, then you're all aligned in the same direction. And then change sticks because you know that what you're doing and the role you play is going to have an impact.
How do you actually define, from as a large organization, value for the customer? Because I think servitization and value are kind of tied together as well.
Yes. So you have to understand what the customer's outcomes are, right? So what is it that the customer wants to do? For the customer, your product is just a tool in them achieving their outcomes, right? So that is where the value lies, and that's where you understand what it is that the customer actually thinks is important, and you almost make yourself a subset, and you are a subset of their outcome. Um, and that's what I mean by value. Because if we just created products in a vacuum and then chose to sell them, somebody would buy them because somebody would find value in them, but you don't necessarily know what about your product is providing them value. The closer relationship you have with your customer, having a servitization model brings you closer to your customer because then you're in partnership with your customer to help them deliver their outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
You will therefore then have an understanding of what is valuable to them. And then internally, anything you create needs to be modular. And the reason it needs to be modular is because then you're able to provide that personalization to your customer. So if you think about your organization and you've got multiple customers, different customers will value different things. So you can't have, well, you can, I suppose, but it becomes difficult to scale. You can't have a personalized um, offering that's so individual that you then have multiple, uh, you have to almost run multiple businesses because you're trying to tailor that to every single one of your customers. But the reality is your customer needs personalization. So how do you create that personalization without creating multiple businesses within your business?
Mm-hmm.
You have modular offerings. So for you, module A, B, and C is probably what's going to give you the personalization you require. For another customer, modules B, F, and G is what is going to give them the personalization they need. So that way, you're able to scale your business accurately with the types of modules that are used most often, and then whether or not, and sometimes you need to make a judgment call. I can't offer that particular element of the service because it's not it wouldn't work for my business, right? Because you're the only customer asking for it. And Maybe if you're a strategic customer, I might invest in it and then see if other customers will buy it. But if not, I may not be able to offer it to you. Or I may partner with somebody else who could offer you just that section, so then you do get a far more personalized offering.
Going a little bit off tangent here, because I imagine that that requires a lot of feedback from,
Yes,
from the one who offers this service and to the customer. And so, of course, feedback could be in the form of what can be improved in terms of the product and what could also be improved as a consequence to the services that are offered. And so, just as, just to also be aware of the booby traps when it comes to this, what should we be aware of as companies when it comes to essentially being open to receiving the feedback?
I think it's having good relationships with your customer, finding a customer that is willing to experiment with you, um, with the focus of them receiving a better outcome as a result, and that you're able to then provide insights and you're able to help them with their outcomes better. So I, it's getting closer to your customer and building that. So it does take some iterations of relationship to get to that point. If you're a brand new company and you're starting out and you don't have those established relationships, then I think it's hard to, you have to create trust first. And then you're able to work with them to be able to find out whether or not the feedback that you're receiving and whether your product is being well received, whether your service is functioning in the way that it needs to. And this is why you have KPIs, you have a relationship manager, you have sort of infrastructure around your offerings to constantly get that feedback. Not sure if that answered your question or not.
Well, a little bit. I mean, I'm always interested about KPI because KPIs are at least absolute. So you kind of
Yes,
have you kind of have something to cross reference, and I think you cannot improve what you cannot measure, right?
yes.
So just going back to that, KPIs, what KPIs should you start with?
You should start with the KPIs that affect your customer the most. And then you also need to have KPIs that have to do with your financial
Mhm.
basis, right? So the route to value, we spoke about that earlier. So you quantify that route to value for the customer and for your company. You need both. Generally, I think if the finance guys are happy, you think it's usually a good thing for the organization.
Okay, so it's always trying to I think consolidate those different KPIs for different people. So we're about to close, and I just have a couple of final reflections to ask you, Umayal. This has been really interesting. So as engineering companies begin or revisit their servitization journey, what key issues should leaders prioritize?
Clear communication. I mean, everybody always says this, but it's very important in terms of clarifying why we're changing to a servitization model. What's the benefits of it? What's the strategy of the organization? Where are we going? How are we positioning ourselves in the market? And ensuring that that message is understood all the levels through the organization and people understand how their role can have an impact and help the organization succeed, because the individual success is the organization's success. And so a people centric focus internally, and then the people having a customer centric focus will allow for success all around.
Okay, I'll I'll open up the next question for you with something like a slum book type of thing. So
Okay.
complete this sentence for me.
Okay.
Servitization succeeds when.
Product becomes a subset of service.
Wow. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I can elaborate on that. So, if you think about servitization as a journey, first you have a product, and then you offer services alongside the product, and then then your product and service is almost on equal footing. And for me, the future is where the product is a subset of the service, and you're able to offer services and it's agnostic of product. And in that case, your servitization model has truly transformed to the next level in that journey or next evolution in that journey, because you're able to then offer your services on products that are not your own.
Wow. And okay, so for our listeners who want to continue this conversation with you or who want to connect with you on this topic, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, in this day and age, the best place is always LinkedIn. So I'm always open to having conversations about what kind of services challenges people are facing in their organizations, or having a sounding board to go, this is how we're approaching things. Do you have a different point of view? And I'm always interested in keeping a finger on the pulse of the challenges that companies are facing, because let's face it, a lot of the things that we talked about are quite utopian. And you're right, it's, the reality is hard. And sometimes the only way to get through things that are difficult is by talking to other experienced people in the same space, and considering either trying something differently or just the support that you're doing the right thing. It just takes time sometimes to get through. Um, we often want instant gratification, or we expect things to succeed on the first go. And the reality is, iteration is important. And having people to talk to about that is also valuable.
Yeah, never preemptively throw in the towel.
Yes.
Okay, so Uma, this has been such a thoughtful and eye opening conversation with you. Really, a lot of conceptual things to also take home. Thank you for your insights, your stories, especially the penguin hero, and for spending the time with us today. Wishing you all the best in what's next, and we'll be following along.
Thank you very much, Nina. I really appreciate the opportunity. I had a great time at the Copperberg event earlier this year, and it's a wonderful community. You're doing great stuff. And it's lovely to be on this podcast and have the opportunity to talk about a subject that I am passionate about.
Fantastic. To our listeners, you will find Uma's contacts where you can find her on LinkedIn in our show description. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please like or follow us from wherever you're tuning in from. Got a topic you'd love us to cover next time? Or maybe you're itching to share your own insights as a guest? Drop us a line at podcast@copperberg.com. We'd love to hear from you. This is Copperberg Conversations on Manufacturing Matters. Until next time.